Hello, friends. This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we talk about manipulation and disinformation in the Russian media. Peace deadlines in Russian, how propaganda turns negotiations into a performance yesterday. Skabeeva's talk show again addressed the topic of peace talks on Ukraine. The airwaves discussed allegedly new concessions from Moscow, deadlines set by Donald Trump, and Kyiv's inability to negotiate. All of this is presented as part of a single scenario. Peace is only possible on the Kremlin's terms. Deadline as a pressure tool. In an interview with NBC, American Vice President J.D. Vance really did talk about the complexity of the peace process. But Russian channels presented his words differently. Trump allegedly gave Ukraine 6 months, until February 2026, to agree to territorial concessions and abandon NATO. The semantic distortion is obvious. Washington's real statements about diplomatic searches are interpreted as an ultimatum to Kyiv. Such rhetoric allows Moscow to portray the US as a pressuring arbiter and itself as a flexible party ready for peace. Russia's flexibility and the rigidity of demands. On Solovyov and other talk shows, it was said, Russia has made significant concessions. However, there are no specifics. Lavrov simultaneously states that there will be no negotiations without Kyiv's capitulation, and Russia is only ready to freeze part of the front. Thus, concessions are reduced to a minimum, but in the eyes of the viewer, the impression of Moscow's generosity is created. The main goal is to move the conversation from the plane of war and aggression to the plane of bargaining and mutual concessions, where the aggressor and the victim appear to be equal parties. Restrictions for Ukraine as a victory for the Kremlin. In Russian programs, special emphasis is placed on the US decision to limit the use of long-range missiles by Ukrainians. This step, associated with controlling the risks of escalation, is presented as a sign that Washington is putting Kyiv in its place. This interpretation fits into the narrative that Ukraine lacks subjectivity, and its fate is decided in Washington and Moscow. Zelensky, as the main obstacle to peace Russian propaganda, continues to portray the Ukrainian president as the main culprit in prolonging the conflict. His demands for a ceasefire are presented as a ploy to obtain new arms trenches. At the same time, the term peace itself is replaced. It is not about ending aggression and withdrawing troops, but about the capitulation of Ukraine with the subsequent legalization of the occupation. The US Vice President reports that Washington is unable to influence Russia. The deadline for ending hostilities is being pushed back, 3 to 6 months. A new deadline is announced, February 24, 2026. I am not saying that the Russians made all the concessions, but what they did agree to was recognizing that Ukraine would retain its territorial integrity after the war ended. And, most importantly, they agreed that Ukraine should be provided with certain guarantees of security and its territorial integrity. Did they make all the concessions? Of course not. They did show readiness and flexibility on a number of their key demands. Zelensky himself, returning from the summit in Washington, rejected all of the American president's peaceful ideas. Kyiv is again demanding a ceasefire and putting it forward as a condition. In order to return Zelensky to sanity, Washington, quietly and without publicly announcing it, deprived Ukraine of the right to fire long-range missiles at the Russian rear. Lavrov as a tough negotiator. The talk show actively cites the statements of the Russian foreign minister. His rhetoric is presented as diplomatic experience and firmness of position, although in fact it is about repeating the Kremlin's demands. Recognition of control over Donbass, Ukraine's refusal to join NATO, and the neutralization of the country. You were on the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.